Hello Aqua friends, welcome to my channel. Today for our Fast and Fun episode, and for the rest of the holiday season we will be making Christmas holiday cards. This bokeh Christmas tree was really fun to make, and I'm going to get right into it and show you how I made the decal edge for the watercolor paper. I made the deckled edge myself by using a letter opener or any stiff object where you could score your paper. So I scored the paper as you see on both sides, divided a full sheet of watercolor paper in quarters. And then I hand turned a 1/4 inch on the last two remaining edges, and I did that and scored it on both sides, and using my hands to support the paper as I rip it down the length of the paper by hand. And that's how you make a deckled edge paper. So for this tutorial, I used a Christmas stencil. Any Christmas tree stencil will do. I am taping down my paper with washi tape because I want that nice crisp white outer edge for the card. So our first step is to wet the paper completely, very well. This is the Wet Watercolor Technique. The colors that I used in this Christmas card was burnt sienna, quinacridone gold, iso yellow deep, as well as I mixed in some metallic gold in with my yellow so that you have a little bit of a sparkle to the paper. Once the paper is good and wet, I'm laying down my lightest colors first. So that is going to be the yellows and the gold. And I am making 3 light areas, kind of like 3 large, huge circles on the paper. Mixing in some of the real gold to get that shimmer into these circular areas. Now, this is the quinacridone gold. It is a deeper yellow. It's darker, and it's just a very rich, vibrant color. So I'm getting that all over the whole paper. And then I'm just going straight for mixing a very, very, as you can see, thick consistency burnt sienna. I would say it's a cream consistency. And I am painting this on and maintaining those 3 large circles. So I'm just trying to get a really nice even coat. I'm just going back over those areas and getting in that burnt sienna, because I want this to just be a 1-layer background. I am not going to be going over the background again. This is it. Now it's drying. I am just getting the rest of the moisture around those edges so we don't get any blooms. And you want to wait for your paper to lose that sheen. Because you notice on the top where you see the sheen of water. So we don't want it to completely dry, but we want to wait for the sheen to disappear. And then with whatever circular tools that you might have on hand for stamping purposes. You could easily pick up some circular stamps at Michael's. I am using these varied sizes and pulling off some of the paint. So because our paper is still wet, we can pull the paint up. If I feel like I need to rinse out the stampers, I do that. You could do that in some water and then just make sure it's not sopping wet. You should have a damp stamper to lift these circles. So dip it in the water, get the excess water off with paper towel, and then lift your colors. As you see, it works really good, and having it overlapping in some areas just kind of adds to the realistic bokeh effect of the lights. So there, I wet it down and I rinsed it off so I could get a cleaner bubble there. And see how I'm rinsing off and getting it just damp, not overly wet. Okay, so you could vary the amounts that you pick up. So we're going to let that dry completely. And another thing I have in my sewing arsenal is this sulky spray that makes things tacky a little bit so that I could stick the tree onto my paper and have it not move around. It's just a little extra security. If you don't have this spray, don't worry about it. I certainly wouldn't buy it. But if you have any sort of adhesive spray that you could lightly spray the back of your stencils, it kind of helps to keep it in place. So I am taking opaque watercolor white and with like a number 6, and I'm just drawing in the Christmas tree lines in the stencils here with this white. I also want to mention that instead of using, which I wish I would have thought of before I started with the watercolor white, but I actually have acrylic pens, like I have acrylic paint in it, and I have these white acrylic pens. And they also work really great. In fact, when I was done this first layer of white, I wanted the white to stand out more, and so I started going over it a second time. And then I realized, oh, I'm going to just go over it with this acrylic pens that I have, and it works really well. And it might save you having to go over it twice. So that's a tip there. So then we gently lift it up, and ta-da! There is our Christmas tree. And it's really starting to come together. It really looks cool. So I'm going over some of these white filigree designs, and I soon remembered about the acrylic pens that I was telling you about, so I switched to that. And it certainly goes a lot faster because you obviously have a lot more control with a pen versus a paintbrush. I also want to mention that if you want the watercolor paper to be your card, you could cut it to size where you can have it folded over. And then the watercolor paper is also the card itself. So I decided to put this pretty painting onto another piece of cardstock. And I'm glad I did because it really turned out really nice. So the last part of the painting is dipping your sponge into your watercolor white, and we're adding some white bokeh effects, and this kind of really just brings the whole theme together and ties in the white of the Christmas tree to the background as well. So I have a thinner consistency of watercolor white because I want that sort of translucent effect. So as I'm going, I'm kind of removing some of the paint off with a piece of paper towel. And when you keep using it without going back into the paint, you will get lighter and lighter colors. So this is what the painting looks completed. And then I just used these little glue dots to put it on a piece of yellow cardstock. Now, how I did the cardstock was I just cut out the paper to dimensions. It's a nice heavy consistency cardstock, and you could use whatever paper cutting supplies you have. I'm sure that they sell a lot of these card making supplies on Amazon or Michael's. I so happen to have quilting supplies, so I just used my quilting ruler and cutter to cut my pieces of paper. So for the inside of the card, I have a piece of white cardstock that I cut to dimension. So you could cut your piece of paper however you would like. Even scissors would do, as long as you draw in the lines and just be careful when you're cutting so it's nice and straight. So to continue with the bokeh theme, I have some pastels, and I'm using the exact same stampers that I used in our painting. And I thought it would be a cute touch to just have a few of these bokeh effects on the inside of the card as well. So just in a couple of corners, I made a few circles here. I'm just using my glue dots once again so that I could adhere this to the inside of the card. And there you go. It is all ready to be written on and given to a loved one. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. And I hope you have a great weekend. See you next week.